Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses. It's show number 315. It's Wednesday, the 22nd of February. It's 9 a.m. back home in the UK and it's 10 p.m. here in New Zealand, where I am recording this morning's or this evening's show. So, right, okay, a fairly quick one, obviously, because I am on the road at the moment on the Shiny Side Up trail. So we'll start with a quick update from what's actually happening out here in New Zealand right at this moment. We'll look at an advanced crash detection system, which has been patented by Honda. Noise from loud exhausts has upset locals in the Philippines, and the police have run over and destroyed illegal mufflers. A flexible LCD screen is being talked about as something that could display adverts, believe it or not, on riders' leathers. And the biggest ever collection of Britten racebikes is on display down here in Invercargill. I just see no misspelled of. And Energica, the Italian company, are taking on the ICE petrol engine bikes in a US race series, which will be interesting to follow, I suspect. And finally, today's discussion point is not why it's time we went back to calling accidents. That was last week's one. It's something about situational awareness, in fact, and why we need it when we're actually out on the road. So, okay. So on with the first piece of news. Now, astonishingly, it's hard to believe actually, but I'm already a week and a half into my travels around New Zealand. This was supposed to be the final day of a 5-day sort of downtime period between the South Island leg of the trip and the North Island events. And tomorrow would have been the first event up here in North Island in Napier. But sadly, thanks to the cyclone, that particular event and the next event in Gisborne have both been cancelled. Now, we do get back on track with the Shiny Side Up. It's a day-long event down at Kapiti, which is near Wellington, back in the south of the island. Now, right now, Judy and I are up in the volcanic heartland. We're in Taupo tonight for the first of 2 nights. We spent 2 nights in Oakuni, which is on the south side of Mount Ruapahu, which is actually the largest active stratovolcano in New Zealand. It's 2,797 meters tall at the highest peak, and there are 2 other peaks as well, which are also topping out over 2,700 meters, so 9,000 feet thereabouts. Now, between the peaks, there is a deep and active crater, and this fills with water between major eruptions. Not surprisingly, it's known as Crater Lake, but unfortunately the crater is the source of some destructive lahars. Now, these are sort of floods of mud and water, so they're very, very dense, they're very destructive, and when the water builds up high enough, usually connected with an eruption of some sort, the wall holding this crater water back collapses and the muddy water floods down the valleys. And it was a lahar that was the cause of a Christmas Eve disaster in 1953, the Tangiwai disaster. 151 people perished in that when the Christmas Eve express train plunged into the flooded river about 10 o'clock in the evening. The lahar had washed one of the bridge supports away, damaged others, and the train went off the rails. 20 bodies were never recovered and were assumed to have been washed downstream 120 kilometers to the sea. The disaster could have been worse, but a motorist realized that the train was coming, and he'd seen that the bridge was damaged, and he tried to stop the train by sort of basically standing on the tracks waving a torch, and the engine driver and the fireman did actually manage to shut off the power to the loco and slow it down, so at least some of the carriages actually remained on the track. But obviously it was a big disaster. We stopped at the memorial. It actually lies alongside the rebuilt bridge, and it just happened to coincide with the first state visit to New Zealand of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, actually, and Prince Philip was at the memorial service for some of the victims. So fairly sobering accident there. From there, we drove up the access road from Oakuni, where we were staying. That leads to the Tura ski field, which is on the southwestern slopes of the volcano. And we stopped off up there at a waterfall, which was apparently used in the Lord of the Rings movies as Gollum's pool. And certainly from up the top, yeah, you get some spectacular views from the ski field. We'd started the morning, in fact, at the National Army Museum. Now, that features a very sobering exhibition of the events that took place on a troop ship, the RMS Tahiti. It was carrying New Zealanders heading to the UK to fight in the First World War in 1918, when the so-called Spanish flu came aboard partway through the voyage. By the time the vessel actually got to Devonport in England on the 10th of September, 68 men had died and a further 9 died afterwards. It's estimated more than 1,000 of those on board had been infected with the disease. It sounds like a truly horrific experience. And the parallels with COVID, of course, were not a coincidence, almost 100 years to the day. Right, okay, so anyway, on with some news. Now, you're probably aware of the crash reporting feature of some mobile phones and devices like the Apple Watch as well. Just trying to get the picture up here. Honda is working on a even more advanced and smarter system than anything that's currently available. So with a bit of luck, you should now have a picture up. There it is. So how's the Honda crash detection system work? Well, it apparently takes advantage of a number of different sensors, some of which will be on the bike, some of which are in the phone, to pool information to generate a more reliable crash report than that can be generated by a phone app alone. I do gather that the iPhone system, for example, regularly creates false reports. Now, the Honda system will first detect if there was a tip over through the bike's existing tilt sensors. Many Honda motorcycles do actually have this tilt sensor in, which cuts the bike off if it's lying on its side so that the engine isn't starved of oil and doesn't damage. But to check that the bike didn't just fall off its side stand, it can use the smartphone's accelerometers to determine whether there was a sudden change of velocity. Now, at this stage, it does what most things will do. It will then prompt the user to cancel a warning on the phone, which asks if a crash has occurred. And if you don't cancel that the warning within a set time, the phone then proceeds to call the emergency services for you, because it's assumed that the rider was unable to actually cancel the prompt for themselves. But there's another wrinkle that this system apparently has. It can use a Bluetooth headset too. Now, I'm not quite sure how this links up and what's information that the headset can provide, but it says that it can use it to determine whether the rider is actually upright or on the ground, or whether they're actually able to stand up and walk around after the phone. So the other sensor that the system can actually access is the speed that the motorcycle was doing. That's recorded in the black box on modern motorcycles, and that will also give the emergency services a heads up as to what they might expect before they actually get to the bike. So that's the Honda new system. It's currently in its patent stage, but it does sound like it could be quite useful if you don't want to end up lying next to your bike waiting for someone to find you. Now, second story today comes from the Philippines. Now, many riders love their loud exhaust, and I have to admit that I have heard plenty out here in New Zealand who are using loud exhausts on their Harleys and the Indians and the custom bikes. But the fact is that most riders do not like the sound of noisy motorcycles, and they do create a problem, which is increasing attention right across the UK. You probably know, if you've been following the show for a while that there are trial noise cameras in several different locations in the UK. And of course, even if you get pulled up by PC Plod, you can be slapped with a fine when they determine your exhaust isn't legal and told to fit a legal exhaust if you haven't got one. Things have gone a step further, though, out in the Philippines. Now, this photo, which I'm just about to put up, there it goes. That's the Philippines, and you'll see there a line of 72 non-legal exhaust mufflers, which have been confiscated from motorcyclists in one particular town, and they laid on a photo shoot as the digger there presumably crushed them, and that was in front of the tongue-tied tonight, obviously too late for these shows, Municipal Hall, and it was in the presence of the mayor of the town and members of the council. So these mufflers were seized from riders in the township itself in just 3 weeks, and it was in response to noise complaints from residents over the public disturbance caused by those motorcycles. Okay, now, of course, not all technology developments have a useful end in sight. I can see the crash alert system from Honda having some positives. But a UK tech firm called Seamless Digital are apparently working on developing flexible LCD screens for MotoGP bikes and, get this, for the riders' race suits. Now, the technology itself has actually made its debut already, but it did it on a car, Formula One 2022 United States Grand Prix. The McLaren team used them. They fitted these sort of mini digital billboards, and they put a couple of units either side of the car's cockpit. And throughout the weekend, the screens were cycled through a number of company logos. They were monochrome, but they did work. And it was said to basically showcase how the technology can be used by advertisers. Now, obviously, since there's relatively little space on a MotoGP bike, there's even less than there is on a Formula One car. One problem for advertisers is that unless you pay a lot of money to get a headline position on the bike, most of the logos are actually too small to be seen anything other than close up. The sort of typical trackside view you get of a racing motorcycle, they'll just be a blur. It also explains why it's very difficult to tell a lot of bikes from riders apart, because you're getting a mosaic of colours and logos rather than any distinctive colour scheme like you're used to. Anyway, the idea is that by fitting these screens to the bike, then the adverts could be cycled through one after the other, made bigger and more noticeable, presumably, as they cycle through the different ads. Now, it would be relatively trivial to actually fit these screens to the bike itself, to the fairing or the not much other bodywork on a motorcycle these days, but the idea that you could actually fit it to a race suit too might be carrying things a step too far. For starters, the LCD unit, though it's flexible, it does have to have some control circuits and it needs a battery. And it might take a while to convince a rider that fitting things like this to the leather suit that they wear for crash protection is actually a safe thing. The other thing that I would say, of course, is that illuminated adverts flashing away beside the road when you're trying to drive or ride are distracting enough when they're static and you're passing them by. But I'm really not sure I'd want to be in the middle of a pack of bikes with ads flashing away on the bikes and riders on all sides around me. I think possibly, again, that could be a technology taken a step too far. Now, if you're a fan of the big V-twin motorcycle, or off-the-wall engineering solutions come to that, you'll undoubtedly already know about the work of Kiwi motorcycle designer John Britten. Britten, who died far too young, he created some very, very innovative chassis designs around carbon fibre, and he built them around his own homebrewed V1000 engines. And his machines gained a surprising amount of success on track for what was a real shoestring effort, literally built in his own garage. And he beat some of the biggest manufacturers in the world at their own game with these bikes. Anyway, the largest collection ever of Britten motorcycles has now gone on display here in New Zealand at the Classic Motorcycle Mecca in Invercargill. Now, the Burt Munro Classic, the challenge event down there, took place about 10 days ago. I couldn't make it, unfortunately, because I was in transit from the UK to New Zealand, thanks to a prior engagement in Manchester. I would have loved to have seen them, and unfortunately our South Island trip was curtailed, as you probably know. Right, so don't forget, if you are watching at home or here even in New Zealand, do pop along and set a reminder for these shows. Now, they normally go out at 11 a.m. UK time, which is about, 12 midnight, isn't it? Of course, NZ at current exchange rates. They're currently going out at 9 o'clock in the evening here 10 o'clock in the evening here, 9 o'clock in the morning in the UK. While I'm in New Zealand, we'll revert to the Classic 11s time when I get back. Sorry, Kiwis, if I keep you up late. You can always watch it on catch up. It will be on Facebook, of course, but also on YouTube, on my YouTube Survival Skills UK channel. It's by far and away the easiest place to watch those shows. So do pop over there and catch them if you can. Now, something that we haven't seen yet on the racetrack, or at least I haven't seen, is an electric engine motorcycle taking on its combustion engine rivals over a full series of racing. And we'll see how this goes this year, because Energica, the former suppliers to the Moto E series, Ducati have just supplanted them. They are taking one of their Eva Rebel Street Fighters, and they will be contesting a full season in the US-based Super Hooligan National Championship. You're probably wondering what the Super Hooligan National Championship is, but it is a sort of an open series, which apparently is for street legal motorcycles with only minor safety-based modification. And it's for all comers, basically. So all the machines race in the same class on the same grid. And it's a brand new series, only started last year. Now, because of the rules of the series, the Eva Rebel isn't the full Moto E competition bike. It is essentially unchanged from the road legal Hyper Naked that you can see in the picture there. So you could go out and buy that today. It's 126 kilowatts in terms of power, 146 pound-feet of torque, so it's a bit of a torque monster. Now, the Misa and Tytler's Cycle Racing did run one of the bikes last year in the Super Hooligan season finale at Laguna Seca in California. That's where the picture there was taken. And the electric torque showed its benefit as the bike jumped from the second row into the lead by the first turn. And that's what electric torque can do for you. And the bike, how did it do? Well, it finished with a top 10 finish. So fairly impressive for a one-off event. So the series begins at Daytona International Speedway in Florida. That's March 9th to 11th. And then there are rounds at the Ridge. I've no idea where that circuit is. Laguna Seca and the Circuit of the Americas. So that's all to come. Be interesting to follow that and see how that particular motorcycle turns its wheels in competition with its petrol engine rivals. Hopefully it will change a few perceptions about electric motorcycles. Right, now I just want to go into the discussion point today. And today, really, I just want to talk about a little bit about what I'm doing again out here in New Zealand. My remit while I'm working with the NZTA and the ACC, the Accident Compensation Corporation, on the Shiny Side Up series of rider safety events. What I don't want to do, and I never want to do, is try to deliver safety in a dull, boring, formulaic, don't go so fast, don't lean over so hard, sort of kind of way. I don't think we achieve much by doing that. I honestly think that if we want to get riders to think about safety, we have to change their perception of riding in terms of what is safe and what is risky. And the best way to do that is not to pretend that by riding ever better, we reduce the risk of falling off. It's to actually to approach the whole problem from the opposite direction, and it's to understand where, why, and how things go wrong on the roads and why we crash. So my task out here is to talk about cornering and junction collisions. Now, I talked about cornering a little bit last time out. I asked if it was rider attitude, which is part of the problem. And to some extent, the same goes at junctions. Now, I've always thought that one of the biggest issues that we have when it comes to talking about collisions at junctions is the blame game, as it's sometimes called. The police, the insurance companies want to point the finger at somebody who they believe caused the crash. And, you know, in a way, it's understandable. The police have a responsibility to clear up the crash. The insurance companies have to pay out. So nobody wants to just accept that these things happen. They want to say, right, it was either participant A or participant B who made the main mistake, and it was participant B or who maybe was a contributor to the crash. And there are all sorts of ways that these collisions get looked at. The police will go out and do an in-depth investigation if the crash is a serious one. If it's, you know, a fairly trivial one with little or no injury but damaged vehicles, there'll be a quick report written up which will say, in the opinion of the police officer involved, who they think was responsible for the crash. The problem is it doesn't really tell us very much about why the crash happened. And the thing I always want to try to get over to people is that we can have crashes because we don't know enough about what is going to happen. We can have crashes that are caused by a lack of skill. Now, we spend a lot of time in the UK on training courses working on emergency stops and swerves. You know, they're both parts of the Module 1 test. You'll do emergency stops for sure on CBT2, although you probably don't do a swerve on CB2. It's not part of the course, but certainly you'll have to demonstrate the ability to swerve and brake on your bike test. So we do develop skills, but the problem we're less aware of, I think, is where the skills are actually required, because we don't really talk about the problem of a junction collision. Now, as I've explained many times before, sorry mate, I didn't see you, Smidsy crash is a two to tangle crash. If one person sets it up, and it's nearly always the car driver, the rider still has to ride into the crash to make it happen. If the rider could see what was about to happen in advance of the crash, then they would have a better chance of taking some evasive action. This is where I'm introducing the idea of situational awareness. Now, situational awareness is something that we are familiar with in probably in a way that we don't think about a lot of the time. Now, just to give you an example of where situational awareness breaks down, I was busy talking to my partner one morning as I made a cup of tea, and I poured the milk straight into the tea caddy instead of the mug that was sitting next to it. It all seemed like it was all going swimmingly well until I looked into the tea caddy and realized what I'd done. And that is a situational awareness failure. I knew roughly where everything was, but I'd lost track of the mug which was sitting next to the tea caddy, and I simply put the milk in the wrong one. Now, we use situational awareness in all walks of life, and as New Zealand's a fairly sporty country, generally speaking, I gave them two examples over here that if you're playing rugby, for example, and you're carrying the ball, you need to be aware of where, firstly, your teammates are so that you can possibly pass the ball to them and continue the attacking maneuver. But you also need to be aware of where the opposing players are, because that will influence your strategy. Maybe you'll carry the ball further, maybe you'll pass the ball sooner. But if you don't know where you are within the environment around you, you are not situationally aware. And similarly, I talked about cricket. If you are the batter and you want to hit the ball and you want to score runs rather than be caught out, you need to know where the fielders are. You need to know the kind of areas that they can patrol and get to, and you need to know where the gaps in the field are, and then you attempt to hit the ball to the gaps rather than the fielders. So that, again, two very common situational awareness sort of examples. But there's also a real safety benefit to being situational aware. Now, think about what you do when you get on a plane. You should, if you are situationally aware, having taken your seat, stuck everything in the overhead locker, got yourself comfortable and all the rest of it, look around and work out where the emergency exits are. Work out how you would get to the emergency exit. Which one is it you're going to? Is it the door that you came in? Is it a door further back in the plane? If you don't know, then if there is an emergency and you need to get out of the plane in a hurry, you're unlikely to find your way in a rush. You need to know that in advance of things going wrong. And that is very, very similar to the situation we face on the road, day in, day out. We face emergencies on the road. They may be sort of minor threats. They may be threats that really do have a risk of harm to life and limb. They can be anything in between. But those threats can very rapidly escalate from the not really worried about that to actually I need to take some emergency action right now. They can escalate very quickly through the intervening stages. And so it's absolutely essential that we are aware of the potential for a situation in front of us to go from a mild threat to a full-on emergency. And again, that is what situational awareness is all about. And the sort of things that we need to know is roughly where a bend would go, for example. If we can't see, then we slow down until we can see. We need to look at junctions. We need to know where the openings are that vehicles can pull out from. We need to know if there are vehicles in those junctions that could turn into our path, or vehicles coming the other way that could turn across us from the other direction. We need to know what we can't see by identifying vision blockers. Remember, a vision blocker obscures what's behind it, and because of the way the brain behaves, what we can't see tends to be out of mind. We don't think about what we can't see. So really important that we actually start looking for vision blockers. Anything that we can't see through: a tree, a hedge, a wall, a fence, a parked car, a building. All of those things can block our view at a junction. Now, I'm putting a new video together, just a short one, which shows exactly what I'm talking about, and that'll be out hopefully tomorrow in the on YouTube, in my maybe in the 60-second safety series, but whatever, it'll be up there, and I'll explain exactly how this works at a junction. Right, so think about situational awareness. It's very often the lack of a situational awareness that causes the surprise for a rider that freezes our response or makes us grab a big handful of front brake and fall off if we haven't got ABS. When we lose the ability to understand what's going on around us, we need to look at other vehicles and think of them just like those rugby players. You know, could that car come into the space that we're about to occupy, and do we need to think about how we're going to take some evasive action if it does? That's situational awareness. Think about it as a game. It's a very, very good analogy for riding a motorcycle. Right, that is it for today. Fairly short one, as I say. I'll try and get one done Sunday. We will be at the Capiti show all day, so it might be a long, tiring day, but I will try and put a short one together for you. So thank you once again for looking in. Good to see at least a couple of people have got up early, relatively early for me anyway. That's it for tonight. Anything else to say? Not really. If you are out there in the UK, I gather there's some wet weather around and possibly some snow coming in the not too far distant future. So if you are riding out there in the UK and anywhere in the New Zealand as well, ride safe and stay shiny side up.